For 4 decades, one event has defined professional wrestling on a global scale. The lights, the moments, the legends, it all happens at WrestleMania. This is a 4-part documentary series tracing the rise, the chaos, the reinvention, and the legacy of WWE's biggest night. From the birth of Hulkamania to the fall of the Bloodline, this is the nerd history of WrestleMania. Before the lights, the stadiums, and the global reach, there was an idea. WrestleMania didn't start as a sure thing. It started as a gamble. Over 10 years, it grew from a celebrity-stacked variety show into a proving ground for icons. Hogan, Savage, Warrior, Brett, Shawn. These were the years when moments became mythology, and when Madison Square Garden was the center of the wrestling universe. This is the story of how WrestleMania became WrestleMania. So picture this. It's 1985. Pro wrestling is still living in regional territories, not the global machine we know today. But Vince McMahon, he had a vision. He didn't just want to grow the WWF, he wanted to flip the whole industry on its head. He wanted a mega event, something that combined wrestling, celebrities, and mainstream entertainment into one massive spectacle. That's how WrestleMania was born. WrestleMania 1, to be exact, March 31st, 1985, Madison Square Garden. McMahon had put everything on the line, financially and professionally, betting that this one night could launch his company into a new stratosphere. Vince McMahon financed WrestleMania 1 with personal money. If the event bombed, he wouldn't just lose a show, he'd lose the entire company. And it worked. The event aired on closed-circuit TV to over 1 million people. It didn't just succeed, it became the foundation for the biggest brand in wrestling. If it had flopped, World Wrestling Entertainment probably wouldn't be here today. He brought in names that turned heads: Muhammad Ali, Cyndi Lauper, Liberace, and Mr. T. Pop star Cyndi Lauper's involvement wasn't just for show. Her MTV fame brought in a whole new audience, especially young fans. Her feud with manager Lou Albano sparked the Rock and Wrestling connection, which helped launch WWF into mainstream culture. The main event, Hulk Hogan and Mr. T teaming up against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff. It wasn't about pure wrestling anymore, it was entertainment. But Mr. T, the celebrity co-main eventer, nearly backed out the day of the show due to backstage tension, mainly with Roddy Piper, who didn't want a non-wrestler in his spotlight. Cooler heads and likely business minds prevailed. WrestleMania 1 wasn't just a wrestling show, it was a moment, a make-or-break gamble that ended up reshaping the entire business. WrestleMania 1 was a hit. The gamble paid off. So for WrestleMania 2, the World Wrestling Federation decided to go bigger. And not just in hype, in geography. On April 7th, 1986, WrestleMania 2 became the first and only Mania to be broadcast live from 3 different cities on the same night. The idea was to make it feel like a coast-to-coast event, a national spectacle. The concept was ambitious. Maybe too ambitious. The technical side was clunky, crowd reactions were all over the place, and the pacing dragged, but in terms of spectacle, it still delivered moments people talk about. Vince McMahon wasn't trying to top WrestleMania 1 with better wrestling, he wanted a bigger show. WrestleMania 2 was about expanding reach, proving this wasn't a one-time phenomenon. Vince tried to take WrestleMania nationwide, literally, by running it in 3 cities at once: Madison Square Garden in New York, the Rosemont Horizon in Chicago, and the LA Memorial Sports Arena. It had never been done before in wrestling. Each location had its own mini-card. In New York, we saw Roddy Piper box Mr. T in a worked boxing match that ended in chaos. The 20-man Battle Royal in Chicago featured wrestlers and NFL stars, including the Bears' William the Refrigerator Perry, who got a huge reaction. He even had a moment where he tricked Big John Studd into thinking he was eliminated, only to pull Studd over the top rope instead. The main event in LA wasn't just about Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy, it was about the cage. This was Hogan's first steel cage match on pay-per-view, and the image of him climbing out, bloodied but victorious, became part of early WrestleMania lore. WrestleMania 2 wasn't perfect, but it proved WWF was serious about scale. It wasn't just about wrestling anymore, it was about pushing limits, whether or not the tech could keep up. WrestleMania 3 was wrestling turned into mythology. March 29th, 1987, the Pontiac Silverdome in Michigan, over 93,000 fans packed the place. At least that's the official number. The actual number is still debated, but no one denies it looked and felt enormous. That visual of the sea of fans in the Silverdome, iconic. Even if you shave it down, it is still the biggest crowd pro wrestling had ever seen at the time. The energy was unreal. This wasn't just a wrestling show anymore, it was a pop culture event. The card had some decent matches, but two moments defined the night. First, Ricky Steamboat versus Macho Man Randy Savage. It was for the Intercontinental title and it stole the show. Fast-paced, technical, emotional. It raised the bar for what a wrestling match could be in the WWF. Ricky Steamboat and Randy Savage meticulously planned their match move for move, over 150 spots, rehearsed and memorized. Savage, known for being obsessive with detail, helped create one of the most influential matches in WWE history. Fans still talk about it like it's gospel. Second, Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant. This was the big one. Andre was billed as undefeated for 15 years, a mountain of a man, and Hogan was the golden boy. The story was simple. The unstoppable force meets the immovable object. And then came the moment. Hogan slammed Andre. A body slam on a man weighing over 500 pounds. It wasn't smooth, it wasn't pretty, but it was legendary. The crowd erupted. That slam became the image of WrestleMania. Andre the Giant was in serious pain leading up to the main event. His back was so bad that just walking to the ring was a struggle. But he still went out there, did the match, and let Hogan slam him, something Andre had never allowed anyone to do on that stage. It was his way of passing the torch. WrestleMania 3 wasn't just a show, it was the moment wrestling felt truly massive, and it proved that moments matter more than moves. And this event delivered moments that still echo decades later. WrestleMania 4 was all about one thing, the World Wrestling Federation Championship. March 27th, 1988, Atlantic City, inside Trump Plaza. Well, Trump Plaza was the host, but the actual arena was Boardwalk Hall, just branded with Trump's name. It gave the show a strange vibe, upscale, subdued crowd, lots of suits, not the typical rowdy wrestling atmosphere. The title was vacant going in, thanks to a chaotic storyline involving Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, Ted DiBiase, and a referee twin screwjob. So instead of a typical card, WWF went tournament style. 14 men, one night, one tournament to crown a new champion. The setup was ambitious, but it made for a long night. A lot of matches were short, some forgettable. The tournament featured 16 total matches across the night, still the most matches on a single WrestleMania card. A lot of them were under 5 minutes just to keep the show moving. The story that carried through was about Macho Man Randy Savage. He wrestled 4 times in one night and made it all the way to the finals, where he faced Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man. Randy Savage changed his outfit for every round of the tournament, 4 different gear sets in one night. Only Macho Man would treat a tournament like a fashion show and a war zone at the same time. Savage got the win with some backup from Hulk Hogan at ringside. It was a watershed moment, Hogan helping Savage win gold, then lifting his arm in the air post-match. The crowd bought in. The Mega Powers Alliance was born. WrestleMania 4 might not have had the best matches, but it told a complete story. One that set the stage for Savage's rise, DiBiase's heat, and the eventual implosion of the Mega Powers. WrestleMania 5 was all about the fallout. 1 year after standing side by side, the mega powers exploded. April 2nd, 1989, back at Trump Plaza in Atlantic City, same venue as the year before, but this time it was personal. The main event was Hulk Hogan versus Macho Man Randy Savage for the WWF Championship. It wasn't just about the title. It was about jealousy, betrayal, and Miss Elizabeth caught in the middle. Savage thought Hogan was getting too close to her. Hogan thought Savage had lost his mind. The promos leading up to it were pure gold, intense, emotional, real enough that fans weren't sure where the act ended. The Mega Power storyline wasn't just a wrestling feud. It played out like a full-on drama over the course of a year, with tension teased in subtle ways long before the blow-up. By the time they hit the ring, the crowd was fully locked in. Miss Elizabeth was kept neutral during the main event, standing in a corner that wasn't Hogan's or Savage's. Her presence added real emotional weight to the match, and fans were genuinely invested in her just as much as the two wrestlers. Hogan eventually went over, big boot, leg drop, 1, 2, 3, and won back the title. The Mega Powers were officially dead, and Hogan was back on top. The rest of the card had some solid moments. Rick Rude beating Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental title was a highlight. Rick Rude became the first person to pin Ultimate Warrior in a WWF match thanks to a little help from his manager, Bobby the Brain Heenan. It gave Rude huge credibility and set up Warrior's rise even stronger in the long run. But this show lived and died by the main event. It was wrestling soap opera at its finest. WrestleMania 5 might not have had the biggest crowd or the flashiest set, but it had a red-hot story. And that's what made it work. When wrestling feels personal, it hits harder. This one hit. WrestleMania 6 wasn't just another big show. It was a generational moment. April 1st, 1990, Toronto Sky Dome. Over 67,000 fans packed the place. The first WrestleMania held outside the US, and the vibe was electric. The Sky Dome crowd brought a different energy, less rowdy, but loud and invested the whole night. This time, it wasn't about good versus evil. It was about icon versus icon. Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior. Champion versus champion. Title versus title. Both guys were babyfaces. Both were massively over. The fans were split. The WWF leaned into it. It was billed as the ultimate challenge. Hogan, the established legend, versus Warrior, the wild card rising star. And surprisingly, it delivered. Warrior and Hogan didn't put on a technical masterpiece, but the match had energy, suspense, and real emotion. Pat Patterson helped lay out the main event move by move. Warrior wasn't known for in-ring finesse, but with careful planning, they pulled off a match that had pacing and drama, one of the best of Warrior's career. In the end, Warrior cleanly beat Hogan, a passing of the torch moment right in the middle of the ring. Hogan even handed him the belt afterwards, selling the moment with a rare nod of humility. That ending was huge. Hogan had never lost clean like that on such a big stage. This wasn't just a win, it was a shift. WrestleMania 6 felt like a true changing of the guard. Even though Warrior's reign wouldn't last long, that moment, standing over Hogan holding both belts in the air, felt like the future had arrived. WrestleMania 7 was originally set for the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum, a massive outdoor stadium that would have held over 100,000 people. But a few months before the show, WWF moved it to the smaller LA Sports Arena. Officially, it was because of security concerns. Unofficially, they couldn't fill the seats. The main event was Sergeant Slaughter, as an Iraqi sympathizer, defending the WWF Championship against the All-American Hulk Hogan. Yeah, this was during the Gulf War. WWF leaned hard into the real-world tension. It was wild. Slaughter burned an American flag on TV, kind of, and Hogan was positioned as the savior of America. It was pure wrestling theater dialed up to 11. Hogan won the belt and waved the flag, classic Hulkamania moment, loud, over the top, and totally on brand. But the real heat of the show? Randy Savage versus the Ultimate Warrior in a career-ending match. The match featured 5 consecutive elbow drops from Savage, and Warrior still kicked out. That level of drama was unheard of at the time. Warrior won, but what happened after the bell was unforgettable. Miss Elizabeth, who'd been off-screen for months, came out of the crowd and saved Savage from an attack by Sensational Sherry. Savage and Elizabeth reunited in the ring. Fans were crying, grown men legit in tears. It turned Savage babyface again, and might have been the most emotional moment in WrestleMania history up to that point. WrestleMania 7 didn't break attendance records or produce 5-star classics, but it felt big. It was dramatic, chaotic, and full of character arcs that paid off. Jake the Snake Roberts brought out a live Cobra during his match with Rick Martel in a blindfold match, one of the weirdest bouts ever booked. Fans had to help guide Jake by cheering when he got close to Martel. Silly? Yes. Memorable? Definitely. WrestleMania 7 had politics, pageantry, and pure pro wrestling soap opera. Not perfect, but unforgettable in its own way. WrestleMania 8 went down on April 5th, 1992, inside the Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis. Over 60,000 fans showed up, and the card looked stacked. You had Ric Flair as WWF champion, Hulk Hogan possibly wrestling his last match, and Randy Savage right back in the spotlight. On paper, it felt big, but the way it all played out, kinda strange. Everyone expected Hogan versus Flair, dream match, right? It had never happened on a WWF stage, but for whatever reason, politics, timing, backstage drama, they didn't book it. Instead, Ric Flair defended the WWF Championship against Randy Savage, while Hogan took on Sid Justice in the main event. Flair vs. Savage was a classic and had a killer build. Flair cut promos holding up fake photos of himself and Elizabeth, pretending they were lovers. Savage was so furious he didn't even wait for his entrance. He sprinted to the ring. Savage was unhinged, angry, ready to fight dirty. They went to war and Savage pulled off the win. Emotional, gritty, and with Flair bleeding all over the place like it was NWA 1986. Easily the match of the night. Then came the Hogan-Sid main event, and it went sideways. The match was flat, and the finish was a mess. Papa Shango missed his cue to interfere, so Sid had to kick out of Hogan's leg drop, which almost never happened. Then the Ultimate Warrior ran back in. Surprise return, huge pop to save Hogan and send the crowd home happy. The whole thing felt like chaos patched together on the fly. The Ultimate Warrior's return was kept completely secret. No leaks, no promos. When he ran out to save Hogan, the crowd erupted. It was Warrior's first appearance in months and one of the loudest reactions of the night. Shawn Michaels had his first singles WrestleMania match here against Tito Santana. It wasn't a classic, but it quietly marked the beginning of HBK's rise as a solo star. WrestleMania 8 felt like a crossroads. Savage reclaimed the title, Warrior returned, Hogan looked like he was on his way out, and Flair, well, he bled all over the Hoosier Dome like a true champion. WrestleMania 9 was something. April 4th, 1993, live from Caesars Palace in Las Vegas. Outdoor setting, Roman theme, announcers in togas, including Jim Ross making his WWF debut while literally wearing a toga on his first night. He was weird from the jump. The show tried to go big with the visuals, but the actual content, rough. The main event was Yokozuna versus Bret Hitman Hart for the WWF Championship. Bret was the fighting champ, the workhorse. Yoko was the massive new heel being built as unstoppable. And you know what? The match was solid. Bret worked hard, had the crowd behind him until the ending. Yokozuna wins, kind of cheap thanks to Mr. Fuji throwing salt in Bret's eyes. The crowd stunned. Then Hulk Hogan shows up, completely unannounced. Fuji challenges Hogan on the spot to fight Yoko for the title. Hogan steps in, hits a clothesline and a leg drop, and wins the belt in like 22 seconds. It made zero sense. Bret just lost his title, and now Hogan's champion again, after not even being in the match. Fans were confused. Bret was supposed to be the new guy, the future. Instead, the 80s walked back in and took the spotlight. WrestleMania 9 was flashy, but creatively all over the place. It looked cool, but the storytelling, not so much. The Undertaker wrestled Giant Gonzalez, a man in a full bodysuit with airbrushed muscles and fur patches. The match was so bad it became infamous. Gonzalez chloroformed Taker, leading to a DQ. Yes, a disqualification at WrestleMania. Lex Luger debuted as the Narcissist, complete with mirrors, pyro, and posing. WWF clearly wanted him to be the next big thing, but the crowd didn't really bite. It was flashy, but flat. WrestleMania 9 tried to mix new stars with old ones, Roman vibes with Vegas flash, but it ended up feeling like a fever dream. And the Hogan ending? One of the most random, criticized finishes in Mania history. WrestleMania 10, March 20th, 1994, back at Madison Square Garden, right where it all began. No togas, no giant guys in fursuits, just wrestling. This show marked a shift. Less cartoon, more competition. The company was clearly moving away from the Hogan era and betting on new talent to carry the torch. The two standout matches, straight-up classics. First, Bret Hart versus Owen Hart in the opener. Brother versus brother. Owen had snapped, jealous of Bret's spotlight, and he wanted to prove he was just as good, maybe better. And they delivered an absolute technical masterpiece. Owen got the clean win in the end, shocking the crowd. It was his night, for about 2 hours. Because in the main event, Bret Hart fought Yokozuna, again, for the WWF Championship. And this time, Bret got his redemption. He beat Yoko clean, and the locker room emptied out to celebrate with him. Bret was the guy now. The crowd knew it, the company knew it, and the show ended with him on top. But it wasn't just about Bret and Owen. The other classic, Razor Ramon versus Shawn Michaels in the first ever televised ladder match in WWF history. For the Intercontinental title, this match changed the game. Shawn flew around like a maniac. Razor brought the power, and they both risked everything. It wasn't just a title match, it was a blueprint for the future. The ladder match between Shawn and Razor wasn't actually the first WWF ladder match. Bret Hart and Shawn had done one at a house show prior to this. But this was the first time most fans ever saw one, and it stole the show. Lex Luger also had a WWF title shot that night, earlier in the card, but got disqualified. He was supposed to be the guy at one point, but by the end of the night, it was clear. Bret was the real top star. WrestleMania 10 didn't have the biggest names or the flashiest presentation, but it had heart. No pun intended. It proved WWF could move forward without Hogan, and that the next generation had already arrived. WrestleMania 10 was about proving wrestling could carry the show again, and with guys like Bret, Shawn, and Owen, it absolutely did. The mid-90s weren't always pretty. Business was down, the stars were fading, but out of the darkness came a shift. First quietly, then with a steel chair to the face. Austin, Rock, DX. The Attitude Era wasn't just a reinvention, it was a rebellion. And WrestleMania became the stage for that war. By the end of this run, legends retired, new kings were crowned, and WWE was no longer just surviving, it was thriving. This is the decade where the rules got broken. And this was never more apparent than at WrestleMania. WrestleMania 11 went down on April 2nd, 1995 in Hartford, Connecticut, which already felt like a weird choice. Small venue, smaller vibe, and the show leaned hard into celebrity appearances. In fact, the main event wasn't even a title match. It was NFL Hall of Famer Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow. Yeah, you heard that right. Taylor versus Bigelow headlined the show. Not Shawn Michaels, not Diesel, not the WWF Championship. Lawrence Taylor's entrance was backed by a full NFL entourage, including Reggie White and Steve McMichael, while Bam Bam Bigelow rolled with the $1 Million Corporation. It felt more like a halftime show than a WrestleMania main event. The match was surprisingly decent for what it was. LT took it seriously, trained for it, and gave it way more effort than most celebrity matches. Bigelow bumped his buns off and made it work. Still, it was a sign of where the World Wrestling Federation was at the time, trying to get any mainstream buzz. Meanwhile, Diesel defended the WWF Championship against Shawn Michaels in a match that should have headlined. The match was solid, even with some awkwardness. HBK was still in his cocky pre-prime era, and Diesel was still figuring things out as a top guy, but the chemistry was there. Diesel retained, and it started planting seeds for bigger things down the road. Undertaker faced King Kong Bundy in a forgettable match, part of a long-running story involving the theft of his urn. Yeah, they're still doing the urn thing. Not a highlight. The show had energy, but the star power wasn't quite there. WWF was in the middle of a weird transition. Hogan was long gone and the Attitude Era was still a few years away. WrestleMania 11 felt like a company trying to find its identity again. WrestleMania 11 isn't remembered as a classic, but it reflects exactly where WWF was in 1995, leaning on outsiders for attention while trying to build new stars behind the scenes. WrestleMania 12, March 31st, 1996, Anaheim, California. After a few rocky years, WWF was ready to go all in on its future, and that future's name was Shawn Michaels. The main event was iconic. Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship in a 60-minute Iron Man match. No gimmicks, no celebrities, no distractions, just two of the best wrestlers on earth going the distance. The goal, most falls in an hour. The result, a draw. 0-0. No pinfalls, no submissions, nothing. So, WWF President Gorilla Monsoon ordered sudden death overtime. One sweet chin music later, Shawn got the win. The image of him on his knees holding the title, tears in his eyes, that's the moment. The boyhood dream has come true. It wasn't just a line. It was the culmination of a long, slow build. And while the show was built around Bret versus Shawn, it had some other wild moments too. The Undertaker faced Diesel in a big man battle that quietly delivered. And then there was the Hollywood backlot brawl between Roddy Piper and Goldust. Part street fight, part car chase, part fever dream. The match ended in the ring with Piper literally stripping Goldust down to lingerie. Somehow this aired on pay-per-view. It even used real footage from the O.J. Simpson freeway chase to sell the angle. Totally bizarre, completely 90s, and somehow it worked. WrestleMania 12 didn't have a stacked card, but it made a statement. WWF wasn't just about size and spectacle anymore. It was about skill, storytelling, and pushing in-ring talent to the front. The opening of the show had Shawn zipline from the rafters down to the ring. Instantly legendary. It screamed, "This is his night." And it was. WrestleMania 12 was the first Mania that actually felt like it didn't need Hulk Hogan. The torch had been passed. Shawn Michaels became the guy, and WWF finally embraced a new era. WrestleMania 13, March 23rd, 1997, Chicago. The card looked weak on paper. There were injuries, reshuffles, and a main event that didn't grab much attention. But hidden in the middle of the show, one of the most important matches in wrestling history. Bret Hart versus Stone Cold Steve Austin in a submission match with Ken Shamrock as special referee. And that match changed everything. It was brutal, bloody, and built on pure intensity. Austin wouldn't quit. Bret went full aggressor. Chairs, ring posts, steel steps, they used everything. Austin got busted open badly, blood pouring down his face, but he never tapped out. Bret locked in the sharpshooter, and instead of submitting, Austin passed out from the pain. That image, Austin screaming in agony, face soaked in blood, became the shot, one of the most iconic images in wrestling, often used in highlight packages for decades. Bret won the match, but he kept attacking afterwards, turning full heel. Meanwhile, Austin lost, and he became the hero. The double turn was masterfully done, and just like that, Austin became the anti-hero fans could rally behind. The seeds of the Attitude Era were planted right there in Chicago. The rest of the card, kind of a mess. The main event was The Undertaker versus Psycho Sid for the WWF Championship. It was slow, awkward, and had zero momentum behind it. The most memorable thing was Brett storming the ring mid-match to yell at both guys. Taker won the title, but the crowd had checked out by then. WrestleMania 13 wasn't about the card. It was about one match that lit a fuse under the entire company. WrestleMania 13 might have not had the hype or the polish, but it had the turning point. After this, everything was different. Everything was shifting. The characters were edgier, the storylines were hotter, and at the center of it all, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He was the anti-hero fans couldn't get enough of. Flipping birds, talking trash, cracking beers. WrestleMania 14 was his coronation. The event took place on March 29, 1998 at the Fleet Center in Boston, Massachusetts. The main event, Austin versus Shawn Michaels for the WWF Championship, with Mike Tyson as the special enforcer at ringside. Tyson was everywhere leading up to the match, on Raw, in press conferences, stirring controversy. And that was the point. WWF was chasing headlines, and it worked. Tyson gave the show mainstream buzz like they hadn't had in years. The match had tension, build-up, and stakes. HBK was working hurt. His back was wrecked, but he gutted through the whole match. Austin brought the fire. The crowd was red hot, and when Tyson fast counted the pin after a Stone Cold Stunner, the place exploded. Austin was the new champ. Tyson turned on DX, and the Attitude Era officially kicked the door in. This wasn't just a changing of the guard, it was a whole new tone. The censors were sweating, but the fans were loving it. Tyson's involvement gave WWF the mainstream boost it desperately needed. When he punched Shawn Michaels after the match, it got covered on sports shows, news outlets, everywhere. Wrestling was cool again. Shawn Michaels wrestled through excruciating pain. His back injury from a casket match with The Undertaker nearly ended his career. After this match, he'd be gone for over 4 years. At the event, The Undertaker faced his brother Kane for the first time ever. A match with a ton of build-up. Paul Bearer had turned on Taker. Kane had debuted months earlier, and they finally clashed in a monster versus monster showdown. It took 3 tombstones to keep Kane down. Triple H versus Owen Hart for the European title was also on the card, and it marked the early rise of Triple H as a singles star. DX was growing, and this was one of the early signs he'd be leading it soon. WrestleMania 14 is where things clicked. Austin on top, Tyson in the spotlight. Generation X breaking rules. The old guard stepped aside, and business was about to explode. WrestleMania 15, March 28, 1999, at the First Union Center in Philadelphia. This was the first WrestleMania headlined by Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock, 2 megastars at the peak of their rise, but still evolving into the icons they'd become. Austin was the rebellious everyman. Rock was the cocky corporate champion, handpicked by Vince McMahon. The story was simple. Vince wants to control the WWF title. Austin wants to wreck everything Vince stands for. Fans ate it up. Their match closed the night. No DQ, tons of brawling, near falls, weapon shots, and just non-stop energy. It wasn't technical brilliance, but it was electric. Austin beat The Rock to become WWF champion again, capping off a wild ride that saw Vince McMahon all over the card, trying to block him at every turn. It was Attitude Era storytelling in its purest form. Overbooked, over the top, and impossible to look away from. The undercard, bit of a mess. The Undertaker versus Big Boss Man in a Hell in a Cell match was slow, forgettable, and then it got dark. After the match, Taker hung Boss Man from the cell with a noose. It was more disturbing than effective, and even the crowd didn't really know how to react. Elsewhere, there was a 4-way tag title match with little heat, a hardcore title triple threat that was a pure car crash, and a Bart Gunn versus Butterbean boxing match that lasted less than a minute, because Butterbean knocked him out cold, and that was real. No script, no work, just lights out. So yeah, WrestleMania 15 was carried by one thing: Austin versus Rock. This was the first of 3 WrestleMania main events between Austin and The Rock, and while this wasn't their best, it laid the groundwork for an all-time rivalry. WrestleMania 15 was messy, violent, and totally on brand for 1999. The wrestling may not have been clean, but the energy, off the charts. WrestleMania 2000 was overbooked in every direction. The event was held at Arrowhead Point in Anaheim, California on April 2nd, 2000. The main event, a fatal four-way for the WWF Championship. Triple H versus The Rock versus Mick Foley versus Big Show, with a McMahon in every corner. Vince, Shane, Stephanie, and Linda each backing one guy. The whole thing was less about the title and more about the McMahon family imploding on screen again. Triple H walked in as the champ, and for the first time in WrestleMania history, walked out still champion. The finish? Vince turned on The Rock, helped Triple H win, and they aligned as the new power couple, along with Stephanie. The crowd hated it. The Rock was red hot, and everyone expected him to win, setting up more drama post-Mania. Mick Foley came out of retirement just for this match. It was supposed to be a triple threat until they added him in. He didn't do much, but the crowd was happy to see him one more time. But let's be real. The match everyone remembers from this card wasn't the main event. It was the Triangle Ladder Match. The Hardy Boys versus the Dudley Boys versus Edge and Christian. No titles in wrestling history had ever been risked in a match like that before. Tables, ladders, chairs, chaos. These three teams destroyed each other in a high-flying, jaw-dropping match that basically invented a new style. Edge and Christian got the win, and the match stole the show. No contest. The rest of the show, some fun, some forgettable. Too many multi-man tags, too much interference, and way too much McMahon, but the energy was there, and you could feel the roster was stacked with future stars. The card was loaded with tag matches and multi-person bouts. In fact, it's the only WrestleMania in history with 0 traditional singles matches. WrestleMania 2000 was messy, but memorable. A moment where WWF had all the talent in the world and was still figuring out how to handle it. They were only 1 year away from one of the biggest WrestleManias ever. WrestleMania X7 felt like the end of a wild ride. Held on April 2nd, 2001 at the Reliant Astrodome in Houston, it was a victory lap for everything the WWF had built during the Attitude Era. In the main event, it was the match. Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock, round 2 for the WWF Championship. Two icons, both at the peak of their powers, clashing in front of one of the hottest crowds in Mania history. And here's the twist. Austin turned heel. The match was a brutal, all-out brawl. Chairs, barricades, near falls, even a bloodied Austin slowly unraveling as he realized he couldn't beat The Rock clean. And in the closing moments, Vince McMahon walked down the ramp. Instead of fighting him, Austin joined him. They beat Rock down together, and Vince handed Austin the chair. Austin won the title with repeated chair shots, then shook Vince's hand. The crowd was stunned. The Texas hero had sold his soul. It was bold, risky, and controversial ever since. Austin's heel turn was a gamble. While it confused fans, it fit the story. Austin was obsessed with being champion again, and he'd do anything to get there, even align with the man he'd spent years fighting. But that wasn't the only thing that made WrestleMania X7 legendary. Earlier in the night, TLC 2. Edge and Christian, the Dudley Boys, the Hardy Boys, tables, ladders, chairs, again. This time it was bigger, crazier, and even more dangerous. Bubba and Matt crashing through stacks of tables, Jeff Hardy hanging from the belts, and Edge spearing Jeff midair off a ladder. A spot still shown in highlight reels 2 decades later. It set the bar for tag team violence. Edge and Christian walked out with the titles again, but all 3 teams walked out as legends. Add in Undertaker versus Triple H in a gritty brawl, Kurt Angle versus Chris Benoit in a technical showcase, and even Vince versus Shane McMahon in a father-son street fight that somehow ruled, and you had a card that delivered at every level. The Vince versus Shane match was way better than it had any right to be. It had run-ins from Stephanie, Linda rising from her coma to slap Vince, and Shane hitting a coast-to-coast dropkick with a trash can. It was chaos, and the crowd ate it up. This was also the first WrestleMania after World Wrestling Federation bought World Championship Wrestling just 2 weeks earlier. Shane's on-screen purchase of WCW was part of the storyline, adding a surreal what now feeling to the whole night. WrestleMania X7 wasn't just a great show, it was the end of an era, and it went out on the absolute top of its game. WrestleMania X8, held on March 17, 2002 at the Sky Dome in Toronto, Ontario, was a weird mix of eras colliding. The Attitude Era was fading. The Invasion angle was done. The WWF had bought WCW and Extreme Championship Wrestling. The company was loaded with talent, but in a bit of an identity crisis. So what did they do? Bring back Hulk Hogan. Not red and yellow American icon Hogan, NWO Hollywood Hogan, and they booked him against The Rock. Rock versus Hogan wasn't even for a title. It wasn't about belts, it was about icons. One of the biggest stars of the 80s versus the biggest star of the 2000s. Generational clash, and Toronto chose Hogan. The crowd flipped the script. Rock came in as a face, Hogan as the villain, but the fans booed The Rock and went absolutely nuclear for Hogan. It was a surreal atmosphere. The match itself, pretty basic, but the crowd made it feel like the biggest thing in the world. Shoulder blocks, body slams, Hogan hulking up for the first time in years. The place exploded. The Rock won, but the real win was Hogan's return to superstardom. After their match, Hogan turned face officially, shaking Rock's hand and posing for the crowd. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall ran in to attack him, but Rock made the save. The NWO was done, and Hogan was back. And here's the wild part. That wasn't even the main event. Triple H versus Chris Jericho closed the show for the undisputed WWF Championship. Solid match, but it never stood a chance after Hogan and Rock. The crowd was burned out. Jericho was booked like a secondary player in his own feud, and the build-up had been about Stephanie and Triple H's drama. Not exactly a strong main event narrative. Still, WrestleMania X8 delivered big-time nostalgia and some great in-ring stuff. The Undertaker defeated Ric Flair in a bloody, underrated brawl. It wasn't flashy, but it was vicious. Taker went 10-0 at WrestleMania with that win. Rob Van Dam made his WrestleMania debut and won the Intercontinental Championship. Showing just how stacked the roster was, even the mid-card had stars that could headline anywhere else. WrestleMania X8 was a turning point, saying goodbye to the Attitude Era, reintroducing legends, and laying the groundwork for the Ruthless Aggression Era. WrestleMania 19 was the bridge. It was held at Safeco Field in Seattle on March 30th, 2003. The Attitude Era was officially over, and the Ruthless Aggression Era was stepping up. The card was stacked, the pacing was tight, and the matches were money. But there were two that defined the night. One emotional, one brutal. First, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock for the third and final time at WrestleMania. The Rock had never beaten Austin on the grand stage. This was about legacy, respect, and unfinished business. What most fans didn't know going in, this would be Austin's last match. He was dealing with serious health issues, and he kept that quiet until after the show. The match itself, well, it wasn't their most athletic, but it hit emotionally. They traded finishers. Austin kicked out of 2 Rock bottoms before finally staying down for the third. After the bell, Rock leaned down and said something to Austin. Private, unscripted, then walked away. Austin stayed behind, soaking in his last moment in the ring. Quiet, powerful, perfect exit. Austin quietly spent the night before in the hospital. He left to wrestle the match, then went back after it was over. He didn't want a send-off, just wanted to finish the job. Then we had Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. It was a wrestling clinic, suplexes, counters, intensity, but the ending? Brutal. Brock went for a shooting star press, a move he'd done in developmental but never on this stage. He missed badly. Landed on his neck. The crowd gasped. Somehow, he still finished the match, hit an F5, and won the title. But he was clearly concussed, out of it, holding his head in the post-match celebration. Everyone backstage was shaken. It could have ended his career. The Brock botch is infamous now, but what's wild is how close he was to landing it. He had the rotation, just not the distance. The fact that he even got up afterward is unreal. WrestleMania 19 had heart, had danger, had stories that meant something. Shawn Michaels versus Chris Jericho was also on the card, and it was a masterclass, technical, emotional, and one of the best Mania matches ever. Post-match, Jericho hugged Shawn, then gave him a low blow. Perfect heel move. Hulk Hogan versus Vince McMahon happened too. 20 years of drama boiled down to a street fight. It was bloody, over the top, and somehow delivered. At one point, Vince rose from behind the apron, blood covered, with a steel pipe and a devilish grin. The visual was insane. WrestleMania 19 was about closure, Austin's last match, Rock's last Mania for nearly a decade, Brock's rise, and Angle risking everything with a broken neck. One of the most complete cards they've ever pulled off. WrestleMania 20 was supposed to be a reset. Held on March 14, 2004 at Madison Square Garden in New York City. It was planned to be a night to crown the next generation and remind everyone that the World Wrestling Federation, now known as World Wrestling Entertainment, was still the biggest game in town. The card was massive, over a dozen matches, and it all built to one of the most emotional main events in WrestleMania history. The headliner, Triple H versus Shawn Michaels versus Chris Benoit for the World Heavyweight Championship. Benoit had spent over a decade in WCW and WWE as the guy who never got his shot. That night, he delivered the performance of his life. All three men were on fire. Blood, submission chains, big spots, and intense crowd heat. Benoit made Triple H tap to the crippler crossface, a rare Mania submission finish, and the Garden erupted. The moment that followed is unforgettable. Benoit holding the title, tears in his eyes, and then Eddie Guerrero, his real-life best friend and the WWE champion at the time, came out to celebrate. Two guys who were never supposed to make it to the top, now both holding world titles at WrestleMania. It was pure, raw emotion. Of course, that moment is now clouded by the events of 2007, when Benoit tragically killed his wife and son before taking his own life. WWE has erased almost all traces of him, but at the time, this was his crowning moment, and it hit hard. Elsewhere on the card, early in the night, you had Eddie Guerrero versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship, a technical showcase with a clever finish. Eddie loosened his boot, and when Kurt went for the ankle lock, it slipped off. Eddie rolled him up, retained the title, and flashed that classic lie, cheat, steal grin. The Undertaker also returned as the Dead Man for the first time in years, having used his biker gimmick the last several Manias. He faced Kane in a short match, but the entrance, Paul Bearer with the urn, the Druids with torches, gave fans chills. That version of Taker was back, and it hit. Goldberg versus Brock Lesnar happened too, and was a total disaster. Both guys were leaving the company after that night, and the fans knew. The Garden booed everyone, including special ref Steve Austin. The match was slow, awkward, and completely rejected by the crowd. Austin stunned them both and got the only cheers in the whole segment. WrestleMania 20 was full of heart, full of hope, and full of history, some of it joyful, some of it dark. But in that moment, it truly felt like the beginning of a new era. This was the era of new faces, internet-fueled hype, and WrestleMania growing into a global juggernaut. Cena, Batista, Punk, Bryan. These weren't hand-picked stars, they were earned. Fans made their voices heard, and WWE, sometimes reluctantly, responded. It was also the era of the streak, of heartbreak, of spectacle, and of chants of yes across the stadium. These 10 years redefined what WrestleMania could be and who it was really for. WrestleMania 21, April 3rd, 2005, Staples Center, in Los Angeles. The tagline was WrestleMania Goes Hollywood, and it wasn't just branding. The entire show felt cinematic, from the spoof trailers in the build-up to the way they used the spotlight to crown new stars. This was the moment WWE finally moved on from the last generation and made it clear who was taking over. Two guys walked in with momentum. They walked out as the future: John Cena and Batista. Cena faced JBL for the WWE Championship. JBL had been on a dominant run, undefeated for nearly a year, cocky, smug, hated. Cena had been rising fast, building that Doctor of Thugonomics swagger, and this was the payoff. The match itself wasn't a classic, but the moment was. Cena hit the FU, pinned JBL clean, and held up his first world title as confetti rained down. That was it, the birth of the face of the company for the next decade. Then in the main event, Batista versus Triple H for the World Heavyweight Championship. This one had a slow burn story behind it. Batista had been part of Evolution, Triple H's muscle, but the split was coming for months. The build-up was about respect, manipulation, and power. In the ring, they told that story with every move. Batista destroyed Triple H to win the title. No interference, no cheap shots, just a clean powerbomb. Another torch passed. But the show wasn't just about two new champions. This was also the debut of the Money in the Bank ladder match, created just for this show. 6 guys: Edge, Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Kane, Christian, and Shelton Benjamin. All hungry, all dangerous. It was chaos in the best way. Edge won the match, grabbing the briefcase, and that moment would end up launching his main event run within the year. And then there was Shawn Michaels versus Kurt Angle, a dream match that actually delivered. No title on the line, just pure competition. They went nearly 30 minutes, traded every hold and counter they had, and Kurt finally made HBK tap to the ankle lock. Wrestling fans ate it up. Still one of the best matches in WrestleMania history. Undertaker versus Randy Orton was another standout. Orton was in his full legend killer mode, trying to be the guy who ended the streak. He came close, even hit an RKO out of nowhere, but Taker rose up, hit the tombstone, and moved to 13-0. It was one of the first times the streak really felt like a story in itself. WrestleMania 21 wasn't just a great show, it was a declaration. WWE was done leaning on nostalgia. It was time for something new. Cena and Batista, Edge with a briefcase, Shawn and Angle tearing the house down. The whole card felt like the company turning the page and for once, doing it right. WrestleMania 22, April 2nd, 2006, Chicago's Allstate Arena. It was the last WrestleMania held in a smaller, traditional arena, not a stadium. And because of that, the crowd was insane. Packed, loud, and hot all night. It gave the show a rawer, more intense vibe, and that helped sell some of the chaos WWE had lined up. This show was violent, emotional, and surprisingly personal, and it had range, from blood-soaked grudge matches to over-the-top spectacle. Let's start with the main event: John Cena versus Triple H for the World Wrestling Entertainment Championship. This was the night Chicago made it very clear they were not behind Cena. They booed him out of the building. Triple H, technically the heel, got cheered like a hero, but that worked in the match's favor. It added tension. Cena locked in the STFU, made Hunter tap out clean, and stood tall in enemy territory. He was the guy, whether fans liked it or not. Earlier, Batista was out, recovering from injury, so the World Heavyweight Championship was on Kurt Angle, and he defended it in a triple threat against Rey Mysterio and Randy Orton. Rey's win wasn't just a title change, it was a tribute. Eddie Guerrero had passed just months earlier, and this was WWE giving Rey the moment. The match was short but emotional. Rey won, broke down crying, and celebrated with Eddie's family in the crowd. It was real. But the match people still talk about: Mick Foley versus Edge in a hardcore match. Foley wanted his WrestleMania moment, and holy heckfire, did he get it. They brought out barbed wire bats, thumbtacks, chairs, flaming tables. Yes, Edge speared Foley through a flaming table. Edge won, but Foley walked away with his moment. That match was brutal, creative, and showed that Edge could hang in any environment. Shawn Michaels versus Mr. McMahon was pure Attitude Era chaos. No rules, lots of weapons, and HBK treating Vince like a crash test dummy. He hit an elbow drop off the ladder onto Vince through a trash can and a table. It was long, wild, and more satisfying than it had any right to be. This was also the year of the Mickie James versus Trish Stratus women's title match, and it was way ahead of its time. Real story, real heat, and the crowd was fully into it. Mickie won, and despite one notorious gesture that got cut in future replays, the match showed that the women could go. Money in the Bank was back for year 2, and Rob Van Dam took the briefcase. He'd go on to cash it in later that summer at ECW One Night Stand in one of the best cash-ins ever. WrestleMania 22 had blood, fire, weapons, emotion. It wasn't the cleanest show, but it hit. Cena cemented his spot under heavy fire. Ray had his tribute, and Foley finally got his Mania moment. It didn't need a stadium to feel massive. WrestleMania 23 wasn't just a wrestling show. It was a full-on media event. It was held on April 1st, 2007 at Ford Field in Detroit. The big hook? The Battle of the Billionaires. Vince McMahon versus Donald Trump. Each backing a wrestler in a hair versus hair match. If your guy lost, you got your head shaved. Trump backed Bobby Lashley. Vince had Umaga. Stone Cold Steve Austin was the special guest referee. It was bizarre, overbooked, and completely entertaining. The match itself was chaotic, stunners, interference, ref bumps, even Shane McMahon getting involved. But the moment everyone remembers? Trump clotheslining Vince, and then, after Lashley won, Austin and Trump shaved Vince bald in front of 80,000 people. It was surreal, and it worked. The match helped drive the highest buy rate in WrestleMania history up to that point. But let's not skip the actual main event. John Cena versus Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship. Batista versus Undertaker got the World Heavyweight title spotlight, but Cena and Michaels closed the show, and they delivered. The crowd was split again, but Cena and Shawn put on a clinic. Hard-hitting, dramatic, and full of big match energy. Cena tapped out HBK to retain the title, and the crowd gave it up for both of them. Earlier in the night, Batista versus The Undertaker was an absolute war, and way better than most people expected going in. Taker won, keeping the streak alive at 15-0, and walked out with the World Heavyweight title. One of his best Mania matches at that point, and it kicked off a string of classics for him in the years that followed. Money in the Bank was back too, and Mr. Kennedy won it this time. He was supposed to be the next breakout guy, but injuries and bad timing derailed that pretty fast. He never cashed in successfully. Also, the Great Khali squashed Kane. Yep, that happened. Melina versus Ashley for the Women's Championship was rough. Not because of effort, but because the division was still stuck in the Divas era. It would be years before the women's matches got the respect they deserved again. But make no mistake, the show was massive. Cena on top again, Taker adding another win to the streak, and Vince getting his head shaved by a future president and Stone Cold Steve Austin together. Only in wrestling. WrestleMania 23 was loud, wild, and over the top in the best possible way. The perfect storm of wrestling and media spectacle, and it proved WWE was ready to go even bigger. WrestleMania 24, March 30th, 2008, Citrus Bowl in Orlando. Open-air stadium, packed crowd, gorgeous sunset. This one had all the big fight energy and one of the most emotional send-offs in wrestling history. WrestleMania 24 felt like a show built around moments, and it delivered some of the most memorable in Mania history. Let's start here. Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels. Flair's career on the line. Flair had been told that the next match he lost would be his last, so here he was, in the ring with Mr. WrestleMania, knowing the clock was ticking. The match wasn't about flash, it was about emotion. And the finish? Devastating. HBK hesitated, looked across the ring and mouthed, "I'm sorry. I love you." Then nailed sweet chin music. Flair went down, Michaels pinned him, then left the ring so Flair could have his moment. Flair stood up, crying, soaking in the ovation. The entire arena was on its feet. Family at ringside, fans in tears. It was perfect. But that wasn't the main event. Edge versus The Undertaker closed the show for the World Heavyweight Championship. And by this point, the streak mattered. Taker came in 15-0. Edge was undefeated at WrestleMania 2. The match was smooth, intense, and full of near falls. They teased everything: ref bumps, finish reversals, even a camera shot from Edge, but in the end, Taker locked in Hell's Gate. Edge tapped, and the streak rolled on, 16-0, and a new world champion. Then there was Floyd Mayweather versus Big Show. A total spectacle. WWE brought in the biggest boxer on the planet and let Big Show play the villain. The match was actually booked smart. Mayweather used speed, weapons, and backup to stay alive. And when the brass knuckles came out, he knocked Big Show out cold. The crowd went nuts. It was way better than it had any right to be. John Cena versus Triple H versus Randy Orton was the WWE Championship match, a triple threat that somehow got less attention than the celebrity match, but it was solid. Orton won, retaining in shock fashion after punting Triple H. The crowd didn't see that one coming. Also worth noting, CM Punk won Money in the Bank, which was huge at the time. He wasn't seen as a main event guy yet, but this was the start of that rise. Batista beat Umaga in a brand versus brand match that didn't do much beyond filling time. Same with JBL versus Finlay. It was a Belfast brawl and it was stiff, but not essential. But WrestleMania 24 will always be about that Flair-Michaels moment. They told a complete story: the aging legend, the reluctant executioner, and the perfect goodbye. This show had everything: emotion, violence, showmanship, title changes, celebrity moments that worked, and a crowd that was locked in all night. WrestleMania 25, April 5th, 2009, Reliance Stadium in Houston, Texas. WWE called it the 25th anniversary of WrestleMania, which was technically off by a year because that's how anniversaries work. But hey, branding. WrestleMania 25 had some hype behind it. Big venue, strong card on paper, and a milestone number. But when people talk about this show now, they talk about one thing: The Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, one of the greatest matches ever, not just in WrestleMania history, but in pro wrestling history, period. HBK came down from the heavens in white. Taker rose from the shadows in black. It was light versus dark, soul versus streak. The crowd knew it was special before the bell rang. And what followed was 30 minutes of pure wrestling art. Reversals, near falls, intensity, and a dive spot where Taker almost broke his neck outside the ring. They recovered, turned the pace up even more, and when Taker finally hit the second tombstone, the building exploded. 17-0. The fans were exhausted from cheering. That match saved the show, because honestly, the rest was spotty. The main event, Triple H versus Randy Orton for the WWE Championship, was one of the coldest feeling Mania main events in years. The build was white hot: home invasions, mind games, personal attacks, but the match, slow. No weapons allowed, despite the personal story. The crowd never got into it. Triple H won clean, but it fell flat. Then there was John Cena versus Edge versus Big Show for the World Heavyweight title. A love triangle storyline involving Vicky Guerrero, of all things. Cena hit one of the wildest spots of the night, lifting both guys at once for an attitude adjustment. The match was fun, but not main event level. Matt Hardy versus Jeff Hardy was a brutal brother versus brother match with ladders, chairs, and a swanton bomb through two tables and a ladder outside the ring. Matt won clean with a twist of fate using a steel chair. It was wild, emotional, and one of the stronger undercard matches. Chris Jericho wrestled a weird handicap match against three legends: Ricky Steamboat, Jimmy Snuka, and Roddy Piper. Steamboat stole the show in that one, moving like it was 1989. Then, post-match, Jericho knocked out Mickey Rourke, who was at ringside fresh off the movie The Wrestler. It was awkward, but it got buzz. CM Punk won Money in the Bank again, back-to-back. Another solid ladder match, with Kofi Kingston and Shelton Benjamin pulling off some wild stunts, but Punk's win set him up for a summer turn that would define his career. WrestleMania 25 didn't hit all the right notes, but Taker vs. Michaels was so good, so timeless, that it made everything else feel secondary. It wasn't just a match, it was a masterpiece. WrestleMania 26, March 28, 2010, Glendale, Arizona. Indoor stadium, packed house, and everything built to one simple massive hook. It lived and died on its main event. Undertaker vs. Shawn Michaels 2. The rematch from WrestleMania 25. Last year was about pride. This year, everything was on the line. If Shawn lost, he was done. No more Mr. WrestleMania, no more comebacks, no more HBK. And in the weeks leading up, he got desperate, obsessed. This wasn't about ego anymore, it was about legacy. When they hit the ring, you could feel the pressure. Fans were quiet during the entrances, like they knew they were watching something final. And once again, they delivered. It wasn't quite the lightning-in-a-bottle magic of their first match, but it had more weight. Every move felt like it could end a career. Michaels kicked out of a tombstone. Taker told him to stay down. Shawn slapped him. Taker responded with one last emphatic jumping tombstone, then made the cover. 1, 2, 3. Shawn Michaels was done. Taker knelt. Shawn stood. They shook hands, Taker walked off, and for the first time, WrestleMania ended with a loss and a farewell. Elsewhere on the card, you had John Cena versus Batista for the WWE Championship. It was their first and only Mania match, and it delivered big time. This was a heavyweight fight. No love lost, just power moves and attitude. Cena won via STF, making Batista tap out clean. A strong co-main, and Cena was firmly the top guy by this point. Chris Jericho versus Edge for the World Heavyweight Championship was technically sound, but the crowd didn't fully buy into it until late. Jericho retained with a code breaker, then Edge speared him through the barricade to close the segment on a high note. Bret Hart versus Vince McMahon happened too. A street fight 13 years in the making. On paper, it had hype. In practice, it was long, slow, and awkward. Vince brought out the entire Hart family to try and outwit Bret, but it backfired. Bret beat the mess out of him with a chair, then made him tap to the sharpshooter. The crowd loved seeing Vince finally get what was coming to him, even if the match dragged. CM Punk versus Rey Mysterio was short but sharp. Classic good versus evil. If Rey lost, he had to join the straight edge society. He didn't. And Punk's reaction? Perfect heel frustration. Money in the Bank featured 10 guys this time, and Jack Swagger won it in what was probably the least hype cash-in winner to date. But he'd cash in days later on SmackDown, so it meant something, even if it didn't blow people away. WrestleMania 26 was clean, well-paced, and emotional. The streak stayed alive. A legend said goodbye, and for once, WWE treated retirement like it actually mattered. No gimmicks, no swerves, just a perfect ending to one of the greatest careers ever. WrestleMania 27 had hype. It had nostalgia. It had mainstream attention thanks to The Rock's return. But when it was over, fans were split, because most of the show felt like it was setting up something else rather than delivering in the moment. April 3rd, 2011, Atlanta, Georgia. One of the most uneven WrestleManias ever. The main event, John Cena versus The Miz for the WWE Championship. Miz was champion, but the spotlight wasn't really on him. It was on The Rock, who opened the show, popped up throughout the night, and made it clear he wasn't done with Cena. The match itself was forgettable, clunky, slow, and then it ended in a double countout. But Rock restarted it, hit Cena with a rock bottom, and Miz got the win. The crowd popped, but everyone knew what this was, a setup for next year. Meanwhile, the real main event, at least in terms of quality, was The Undertaker versus Triple H. This match didn't have the same stakes as the Shawn matches did, but it might as well have. They beat the heck out of each other. Chairs, announce tables, finishers, tombstones, brutal stuff. And it ended with Taker barely locking in Hell's Gate and forcing Triple H to tap. Taker went 19-0, but couldn't even walk out under his own power. That told the story. He won, but it nearly killed him. Easily match of the night. Randy Orton versus CM Punk was solid, built on mind games and sneak attacks, and the crowd was into it. Orton won with a mid-air RKO that looked amazing. The undercard, though, rough. Edge versus Alberto Del Rio opened the show for the World Heavyweight Championship. The match was decent, but the moment was bigger. This would be Edge's last match for nearly a decade. He retired due to neck issues just days later. Nobody knew it at the time, but this was a quiet goodbye from one of WWE's biggest stars. Jerry the King Lawler versus Michael Cole happened, and it dragged. It was built up for months, and fans wanted to see Cole get wrecked. But the match was long, awkward, and it ended in a reverse decision that made no one happy. Even Austin as the guest ref couldn't save it. Snooki wrestled. In the women's division, still being treated as filler. Trish Stratus, John Morrison, and Snooki beat Laycool and Dolph Ziggler in a forgettable six-person tag. Sad waste of talent and time. WrestleMania 27 felt like a holding pattern. It was all about getting to Cena versus Rock next year. And while Taker versus Triple H was elite and Orton versus Punk was strong, the rest didn't land. But the seeds were planted. Rock versus Cena, Miz's peak, and Edge's shock goodbye. Even if it wasn't great in the moment, it shaped what came next. WrestleMania 28, April 1st, 2012, Miami Gardens, Florida, Sun Life Stadium. This one had massive hype. A full year of build. Once in a lifetime, Rock versus Cena. It was all over mainstream media, and this time WWE delivered big. Two eras colliding. The Attitude Era's final icon and the face of the PG era, WWE. They announced the match a year in advance, and somehow the hype never cooled down. Miami was buzzing. The crowd was split, loud everywhere. And when the bell rang, they delivered. It wasn't a technical clinic. It didn't need to be. It was a big fight feel match built around counters, taunts, and pacing. Every move meant something. And then, in the closing moments after a cocky Cena went for the people's elbow, Rock popped up, hit the rock bottom, and pinned Cena clean. The stadium erupted. Rock won. Cena sat crushed in the corner, and once in a lifetime ended with a surprise. Elsewhere, Undertaker versus Triple H 2, this time inside Hell in a Cell, with Shawn Michaels as special referee. Was every bit as dramatic as you'd expect. It was billed as the end of an era, and it felt like it. Chairs, sledgehammers, finishers, HBK freaking out, near falls that had people standing up. When Taker finally won, 20-0, the three of them stood on the ramp together, arms around each other, soaking it in. No promo could have matched that visual. CM Punk versus Chris Jericho for the WWE Championship was the technical masterpiece of the night. Jericho tried to get in Punk's head before the match, mocking his family, his straight-edge lifestyle, but Punk stayed locked in. It was a smart, crisp match with chain wrestling and stiff shots, and Punk retained via Anaconda Vice in the middle of the ring. Daniel Bryan versus Sheamus opened the show and ended in 18 seconds. Bryan turned to kiss AJ Lee at the bell, Sheamus hit a brogue kick, and it was over. The crowd hated it. But that backlash, though, it launched the Yes movement. So in a weird way, it worked. The rest of the card had some filler. Big Show finally won a Mania match, beating Cody Rhodes for the Intercontinental title. Team Johnny versus Team Teddy determined control of Raw and SmackDown. Nobody remembers who won it. It was Team Johnny, but it filled time. Kelly and Maria Menounos beat Eve and Beth Phoenix in a celebrity tag match that didn't do much, but the crowd was respectful. WrestleMania 28 felt huge. Taker, Triple H, and HBK had a WrestleMania curtain call. Rock beat Cena in his hometown. Punk and Jericho gave the purists their match, and Bryan's 18-second loss weirdly iconic. This was WWE operating at full awareness of what Mania should be: spectacle, story, and one match that feels like the center of the universe. WrestleMania 29, April 7th, 2013, MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Over 80,000 in the crowd. Cold weather, big setup. The card was headlined by the rematch nobody really asked for: The Rock versus John Cena 2 for the WWE Championship. The year before, it was once in a lifetime. Now, twice in 2 years. This time, the story was redemption. Cena had lost to Rock in Miami, and it sent him into a spiral. Now he was back to prove he could win when it mattered most. The match itself, safe, slow, clean. Two pros doing their thing, but without the magic of the first time. Lots of finishers, a couple false finishes, and then Cena countered a rock bottom into an attitude adjustment for the win. The crowd popped. Kind of. Cena offered a handshake, Rock accepted, they posed on the ramp together. Mutual respect, no drama, no heel turn, just done. It wasn't bad. It just felt like a repeat. Now let's talk about the real main event: The Undertaker versus CM Punk. This was Punk at peak heel. Paul Heyman by his side, disrespecting Paul Bearer's death, taunting Taker week after week. The story was personal, and the match an absolute banger. Punk brought the mind games, the pacing, the athleticism, and Taker met him move for move. Kicks, counters, table spots, old school into GTS, into tombstone teases. It was wild. In the end, Taker nailed the tombstone and moved to 21-0, but Punk looked like a made man. Match of the night, easily. Elsewhere, Triple H versus Brock Lesnar in a no-holds-barred match with Triple H's career on the line. It was brutal. Steel steps, chair shots, spine busters on tables, but also kind of slow. It had big moments, but didn't fully click. Triple H won, obviously, because he was not retiring yet. Alberto Del Rio versus Jack Swagger for the World Heavyweight title opened the card, and was totally forgettable. Swagger had some real-world legal trouble going on, and the crowd just wasn't invested. Del Rio won with the cross arm breaker. The Shield made their Mania debut facing Big Show, Sheamus, and Randy Orton in a six-man tag. They looked like killers. Clean teamwork, fast pacing, and a win after Ambrose pinned Orton. It was the start of something big. Fandango made his Fandango made his in-ring debut and beat Chris Jericho. Crowd was hot for it. The match was decent, and somehow it led to a theme song going viral the next night. Strangely entertaining. Kane and Daniel Bryan defended the tag titles against Dolph Ziggler and Big E. Fun match, but the crowd was ready for Bryan to break out. WrestleMania 29 was a tale of two halves. The top build match underdelivered, but the rest was solid to excellent. Punk vs. Taker was must-watch. The Shield made an impact, and Cena Rock 2, well, it closed the show, but it didn't steal it. WrestleMania 30, April 6, 2014, New Orleans Superdome. This wasn't just a great show, it was one of the most emotionally satisfying nights WWE had ever put together. Two huge shockers, one massive underdog story, and a crowd that was fully living every second of it. WrestleMania 30 wasn't supposed to be about Daniel Bryan. The original plan was all about Batista's return, the Authority, and big names like Orton and Lesnar. But the fans said, nah, dog, and WWE had to pivot. What we got instead? A story about earned glory, and a payoff that hit perfectly. Bryan opened the night facing Triple H in a must-win match. If he beat Hunter, he'd be added to the main event for the WWE World Heavyweight title. And they didn't just make Bryan squeak by, they let him steal the show. It was a near-perfect match, technical, fast, emotional. Bryan won clean with the knee, and the crowd erupted. But that was just part one. Part two, Daniel Bryan versus Randy Orton versus Batista in the main event. Bryan came in taped up, selling the arm. They beat him thoroughly. There was a brutal Batista bomb RKO combo through the announce table. It looked like he was done, but he kept coming. Crowd fully behind him. Then running knee to Batista. 1, 2, 3. Yes chants everywhere. Confetti. Bryan on his knees, belts in hand, crying. One of the most satisfying Mania endings ever. But that wasn't even the biggest shock of the night. Earlier, The Undertaker faced Brock Lesnar. And let's be real, nobody thought Taker was losing. 21-0. The streak had become sacred. But then, F5. 1, 2, 3. And the crowd went silent. The graphic hit, 21-1. Lesnar's music played and people in the Superdome just sat there, stunned, faces blank. The most protected record in wrestling was gone. And WWE let that moment breathe. No music, no commentary, just pure disbelief, like a funeral. Whether you loved it or hated it, you felt it. Elsewhere on the card, The Shield steamrolled Kane and the New Age Outlaws in a total squash. Reigns, Rollins, and Ambrose were red hot, and this was a momentum builder. John Cena versus Bray Wyatt was a big spotlight for Bray, and the crowd was fully behind him, but WWE still had Cena win clean, which felt off. Great storytelling, but wrong winner for a lot of fans. Cesaro won the inaugural Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal. And the finish was awesome. He body slammed Big Show over the top rope, echoing Hogan-Andre vibes. Huge pop. Felt like a star-making moment, even if WWE didn't follow through with Cesaro later on. Also, Hogan, Austin, and The Rock opened the show together. A total nostalgia hit. 3 eras, 1 ring, and Hogan hilariously calling the Superdome the Silver Dome several times. Austin roasted him. Rock dropped catchphrases, and the crowd loved every second. WrestleMania 30 was magic. Bryan finally crowned. The streak ended. Real surprises, real emotion. It wasn't just a good WrestleMania. It was a perfect storm of storytelling, crowd energy, and stakes actually mattering. WrestleMania entered its next chapter in the era of reality. The lines blurred. Fan favorites weren't always company favorites, but stars like Seth Rollins, Becky Lynch, and Cody Rhodes showed that the journey mattered. Roman Reigns became inevitable. The fans disappeared during a pandemic and then came back louder than ever. The story was finished. These WrestleManias told stories that took years to pay off, and when they did, the roof came off. WrestleMania 31, March 29th, 2015, Levi Stadium in Santa Clara, California. This one had low expectations going in, and ended up being one of the best WrestleManias of the decade. Great pacing, hot crowd, and an ending nobody saw coming. WrestleMania 31 didn't have the dream card. People weren't sold on Roman Reigns in the main event. The build was shaky, but when the lights went up and the show started, it clicked. This was WWE firing at all cylinders, with one of the boldest finishes in Mania history. Let's jump right into the main event. Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns for the WWE Championship. Lesnar was in full monster mode, suplexing Reigns over and over, screaming, "Suplex City!" and bleeding from the mouth. Reigns kept laughing through the pain, eating shots and asking for more. It was brutal, raw, and better than anyone expected. And then, Seth Rollins' music hit. He ran down mid-match, briefcase in hand, and cashed in Money in the Bank on the spot. Suddenly, it was a triple threat. Rollins hit the curb stomp, pinned Reigns, and stole the WWE title. The crowd lost their minds. Commentary called it the heist of the century. Rollins ran up the ramp holding the title, laughing like a madman. And just like that, a good main event became an iconic one. The rest of the show was solid across the board. Randy Orton versus Seth Rollins earlier in the night was crisp, intense, and ended with one of the best RKO counters ever. Rollins went for the curb stomp, Orton launched him into the air and hit the RKO on the way down. Clean as clean could be. Sting vs. Triple H was full of nostalgia. D-Generation X showed up. The NWO showed up. Baseball bats, sledgehammers, chaos everywhere. Triple H won. Yeah, he pinned Sting in Sting's first WWE match, which still feels wrong, but the moment was fun. Undertaker vs. Bray Wyatt was slow but symbolic. Taker was back after losing the streak. The match wasn't great. Bray was wrestling on a legit bad ankle, but the crowd wanted Taker back on the winning side, and that's what they got. John Cena vs. Rusev for the US title had wild entrances. Rusev came out on a tank. Cena came in to a video about America. The match was solid, and Cena winning helped elevate the US title for the first time in years. AJ Lee and Paige versus the Bella Twins was fine, but it came during a time when fans were chanting for a Divas Revolution and expecting something bigger. The talent was there, the presentation wasn't. Yet. The 7-man ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship opened the night. Daniel Bryan won it, and the crowd loved seeing him get another Mania moment, even if his run afterwards was short due to injuries. Big ladder bumps, high energy, great choice to start the show. WrestleMania 31 wasn't about what was expected, it was about what was executed. Great pacing, no duds, smart storytelling, and an ending that flipped the script completely. WrestleMania 32, April 3rd, 2016, AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas. WWE announced a record-breaking crowd of over 101,000. Biggest WrestleMania attendance ever. This was supposed to be huge, but injuries, odd booking, and the sheer length of the show made it one of the most bloated and uneven Manias in history. WrestleMania 32 was massive. Huge stadium, pyro everywhere, big name returns, but the card was kind of cursed. A bunch of top stars were out: Cena, Rollins, Orton, Cesaro, and the company had to pivot. What we got was a show that looked like WrestleMania, but didn't always feel like it. The main event, Triple H vs. Roman Reigns for the WWE World Heavyweight Championship. It was a long, slow match with a crowd that did not want Roman to win, and WWE pushed through anyway. Roman kicked out of everything, speared Hunter, and held up the title while the stadium gave him a mixed to flat reaction, not the feel-good ending WWE wanted. But earlier, there were high points. Shane McMahon versus The Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell. Shane jumped off the top of the cell. No trick camera, no crash pad, just full send. It was nuts. He missed, obviously, crashing through the announce table. Taker won. The match dragged at times, but that moment alone, unforgettable. Shane's still flying. Charlotte Flair versus Sasha Banks versus Becky Lynch was a game changer. It was the rebranding of the Divas division into the WWE Women's Championship, and they got time to work. They stole the show in ring. Charlotte won, but all three came out looking like the future. This match was the real start of the women's evolution on the Mania stage. The ladder match for the Intercontinental title was another highlight. Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn, Zack Ryder, Stardust, Miz, Ziggler, and Sin Cara all flying around. And in a total shocker, Zack Ryder won. Huge moment. Short reign, he lost it the next night, but it got the crowd hyped early. Brock Lesnar versus Dean Ambrose was a huge missed opportunity. Fans were expecting a violent, wild brawl. Instead, it was a short, weirdly flat match, and it felt like Brock wasn't interested. Ambrose brought weapons. Brock brought suplexes, and that was it. The Rock showed up, cut a promo, and beat Eric Rowan in a 6-second match, the shortest in Mania history. Then the Wyatt family surrounded him. John Cena made a surprise return to back him up, which got a massive pop. Totally unnecessary, but totally fun. Also, League of Nations versus New Day happened. Forgettable match, but amazing entrance. New Day came out of a giant box of Booty-O's cereal dressed like Dragon Ball Z characters. After the match, HBK, Mick Foley, and Steve Austin came out, cleaned house, and danced until Austin hit a stunner. Pure nostalgia hit. WrestleMania 32 had scale, it had moments, but the pacing, the main event, and a few dead matches dragged it down. It's a Mania that looked iconic, but under the hood, it needed an edit. WrestleMania 33, April 2nd, 2017, Camping World Stadium in Orlando, Florida. Outdoor show, massive set, the world's longest entrance ramp, and one of the loudest nostalgia pops ever. It was billed as the ultimate thrill ride, and while not every match hit, this one had some unforgettable moments. WrestleMania 33 was a long show, over 5 hours not counting the pre-show, but it gave fans a bit of everything: emotion, surprise returns, hard-hitting matches, and a main event that felt like the end of an era. But let's start where the night peaked: the return of the Hardy Boys. The Raw Tag Team Championship match was originally a triple threat ladder match until the New Day walked out dressed to compete, then swerved everyone by introducing a fourth team. Cue the Hardy Boys music. Crowd lost its mind. Jeff and Matt hadn't been in WWE in nearly a decade. They had just worked a ladder match in Ring of Honor the night before, and now they were back on the biggest stage, climbing ladders like it was 2000 again. Jeff hit a swanton off a huge ladder. They won the titles, biggest pop of the night, easily. The main event, Roman Reigns versus The Undertaker. And yeah, this one was rough. Taker looked worn down. Roman did what he could, but the match dragged. The story was clear. This was supposed to be Taker's last ride. Roman beat him clean after multiple spears. Then, post-match, Taker took off his gloves, hat, and coat and left them in the ring. Symbolic, emotional. The crowd gave him the respect, even if they booed the match. Elsewhere on the card, Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg was short, but awesome. Just under 5 minutes of pure explosiveness. Spears, suplexes, F5s, that's it. Brock won the Universal title, and it was way better than their WrestleMania 20 match. Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt for the WWE title. Not so much. Bray used spooky CGI projector graphics on the mat, worms and bugs. The crowd didn't care. The crowd could barely see it. Orton hit an RKO and won flat. Seth Rollins versus Triple H was a solid unsanctioned match with good storytelling. Seth was selling a bad knee, Triple H was picking him apart, and in the end, Rollins hit the pedigree for the win. Stephanie McMahon went through a table too. Bonus points. John Cena and Nikki Bella versus The Miz and Maurice was more about the post-match moment. Cena proposing to Nikki in the ring. Cute. Crowd wasn't into it, but it hit the mainstream headlines, which was the point. AJ Styles versus Shane McMahon opened the main card and surprised everyone. Shane hung with AJ. Counters, high spots, and a clean Styles clash for the win. Way better than it had any right to be. Kevin Owens versus Chris Jericho for the U.S. title had some great storytelling, built from their amazing Festival of Friendship breakup. Owens won, but the match got a weird spot on the card and never hit top gear. WrestleMania 33 was long. It was uneven, but it had moments. The Hardys' return, Taker's symbolic exit, Lesnar and Goldberg finally getting it right. It felt like closure for some and a spotlight for others. WrestleMania 34, April 8th, 2018, Mercedes-Benz Superdome in New Orleans. WWE stacked the card. On paper, this show looked like a classic, and it almost was, until the main event derailed the whole night. WrestleMania 34 was loaded. WWE crammed every major division with stars, title matches, comebacks, dream bouts, and for the first few hours it delivered. But by the end of the night, the crowd was burnt, and the closing match hit with a thud. But let's start with the high point: Ronda Rousey's in-ring debut. It was Ronda Rousey and Kurt Angle versus Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, and no one expected it to be this good. Ronda crushed it. She looked comfortable, confident, and believable from the second she stepped in the ring. The crowd was red hot. She even got Triple H in an armbar at one point. It was chaos in the best way. Ronda made Steph tap, and just like that, WWE had a brand new star. Another huge moment, Daniel Bryan's return to the ring. After being medically cleared, he teamed with Shane McMahon to face Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. The emotion was real. Bryan took a powerbomb on the apron early, sold it like death, then came back with a full comeback sequence. Running drop kicks, yes kicks, the whole deal. He looked great. Crowd loved it. He made Zayn tap out to the yes lock. Emotional win. AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura for the WWE Championship was hyped as a dream match, and it was solid, but a little too restrained. The real moment came after the match. Nakamura turned heel with a low blow on AJ. That shocked people and set off a fresh storyline. Charlotte Flair versus Asuka was another strong one. Asuka's undefeated streak was on the line, and it ended. Charlotte made her tap clean to the figure 8. Huge surprise, and even though the loss raised eyebrows, the match itself was a showcase for both. But the main event, Brock Lesnar versus Roman Reigns, bombed. The crowd was done. They'd been sitting for nearly 7 hours, and instead of something fresh, they got Suplex City again. Brock dominated, Reigns bled a lot, and the crowd chanted for anything but the match. Brock retained, totally out of nowhere, and fans were left confused, bored, or both. Also on the card, the Bludgeon Brothers squashed the Usos and the New Day to win the SmackDown Tag Titles. Cool moment, but forgettable reign. Braun Strowman teamed with a literal child, Nicholas, a fan from the crowd who was actually a referee's son, to beat the Bar for the Raw Tag Titles. The crowd laughed, kids loved it. The belts were vacated the next night, but it was a total WrestleMania moment. The Undertaker squashed John Cena in a surprise match that was teased all night. Cena was in the crowd, got the call, ran backstage, and boom, Taker showed up, squashed him in under 3 minutes. Not a classic, but a fun moment. WrestleMania 34 had the bones of a great show. Ronda shined, Bryan returned, Charlotte snapped, Asuka's streak broke, but that main event just sucked the life out of the Superdome. It's the classic good show, bad finish story. WrestleMania 35, April 7th, 2019, MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. This one was long. Like, real long. But packed with emotional highs and feel-good finishes. For the first time ever, the women closed the show, and 2 underdog stories finally got their payoffs. WrestleMania 35 had one mission: deliver on the hype. And for most of the night, it did exactly that. This was a show about payoffs, years in the making, grassroots support, and WWE finally listening to the crowd. Let's start with the biggest moment, the first women's main event in WrestleMania history. Becky Lynch versus Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte Flair for both the Raw and SmackDown Women's Championships. Becky had caught fire leading into this. The man persona took over, fans rallied behind her, and the Becky Two Belts movement took off. The match had energy, but the finish was weird. A botched crucifix pin where Ronda's shoulders weren't fully down. Still, Becky got the win, held up both titles, and the crowd exploded. History made. Earlier, the purest feel-good moment of the night, Kofi Kingston versus Daniel Bryan. Kofi had been in WWE for over a decade, always reliable, never pushed to the top. But the fans changed that. Kofi Mania was born, and WWE leaned in. Bryan was the perfect heel, preachy, smug, and dangerous. The match was emotional, physical, real. And when Kofi hit the Trouble in Paradise and pinned Bryan clean, the crowd lost it. Tears, confetti, his son's in the ring. It was everything a WrestleMania moment should be. Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar opened the main card, and Lesnar attacked him before the bell even rang. But once the match officially started, Rollins hit a low blow and 3 curb stomps to win the Universal title in under 3 minutes. Hot start, big pop, smart booking. Batista versus Triple H was wild. Overbooked, weapons everywhere, and Batista taking bumps like a madman at 50. Triple H ripped out Batista's nose ring with pliers. It was too long, but brutal in the right ways. Triple H won, and Batista retired the next day. Shane McMahon versus The Miz gave us a fun, chaotic mess, featuring a suplex off the platform into some scaffolding that knocked them both out. Shane landed on top, so he won by accident. Comedy gold. AJ Styles versus Randy Orton was good, but got hurt by terrible lighting. Fans in the stadium were blinded by a spotlight and literally couldn't see parts of the match. Roman Reigns versus Drew McIntyre was Reigns' big match return after beating leukemia. The match itself was just okay, but the moment was more important than the moves. The crowd showed love. Roman won. John Cena came back as the Doctor of Thugonomics, interrupting Elias. Total nostalgia blast. Rhymes, insults, a 5-knuckle shuffle. Fans ate it up. The Iconics won the women's tag titles in a surprise finish, stealing the win from Sasha Banks and Bayley. Huge reaction even if the reign didn't last. WrestleMania 35 was long, over 7 hours if you include the pre-show, but it delivered where it counted. Kofi, Becky, Seth, feel-good wins across the board. It didn't need to be perfect, it just needed to pay off for the people fans had backed. And it did. WrestleMania 36, April 4th and 5th, 2020. This was the first and hopefully only pandemic-era Mania. No fans, no stadium, just a quiet performance center in Orlando, and 2 nights of wrestling history rewritten on the fly. It was surreal, awkward, creative, and surprisingly emotional. WrestleMania 36 wasn't just different, it was completely reimagined. The COVID-19 pandemic shut down live events weeks before Mania, and WWE had to pivot fast. So they taped the show in advance, split it into 2 nights, and did something that felt impossible. They made it work. Let's talk about the main events. Night 1 closed with The Undertaker versus AJ Styles in a boneyard match. And this wasn't a match in a ring, it was a cinematic fight scene, shot like a gritty action movie in a graveyard. AJ Styles showed up in a hearse. Taker rolled in as the American bad boy on a motorcycle. They brawled across a barn, smashed each other into tombstones, and Taker literally buried AJ alive. It was weird, wild, and awesome. For a lot of fans, it became an unexpected favorite, and, as it turned out, Undertaker's last match. Night 2 closed with Drew McIntyre versus Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship. Short, intense, 4 minutes of finishers, and Drew hit 4 claymores to finally pin Brock. No crowd, but you could feel the emotion. Drew's rise had been years in the making. WWE aired a shot of him holding the belt, talking directly to the camera. A quiet, powerful moment in the middle of global chaos. Also on the card, John Cena versus The Fiend Bray Wyatt in a Firefly Funhouse match. And listen, this wasn't a match, it was a psychological fever dream. Cena was pulled through alternate realities. NWO Cena, Ruthless Aggression Cena, Puppet Vince yelling about ruthless aggression. It was part parody, part therapy session, part character dissection. Bray won, but the story was about Cena confronting every version of himself, and WWE letting go of logic for something totally experimental. It was weird and it ruled. Edge returned to the ring after 9 years away, facing Randy Orton in a last man standing match. It was long, physical, and very real. Maybe too long, it went nearly 40 minutes, but Edge held his own and delivered a gritty, emotional performance. It ended with a concerto. Edge won, and it meant something. Charlotte Flair beat Rhea Ripley for the NXT Women's Championship in one of the best straight-up wrestling matches of the weekend. Hard-hitting, technical, and gave the NXT brand real shine. Kevin Owens versus Seth Rollins was another standout. It started as a standard match, got restarted as no DQ, and ended with Owens diving off the WrestleMania sign, one of the best visuals of the night. Becky Lynch versus Shayna Baszler ended Becky's historic run. But not quite yet. She retained the Raw Women's title in a short, stiff match that felt more like a fight than a showcase. A few weeks later, she would reveal that the winner of the Women's Money in the Bank match that year was unknowingly competing for the Raw Women's title itself, as Becky was stepping away from the ring because she was pregnant. Braun Strowman replaced Roman Reigns, who pulled out due to health concerns, and squashed Goldberg to win the Universal title. Not much of a match, but it served its purpose. WrestleMania 36 was quiet, eerie, strange, but it showed WWE's ability to adapt under pressure. The cinematic matches stole the show. Drew got his moment, Edge came back, and Taker went out with style. No crowd, but still, a WrestleMania people will never forget. WrestleMania 37, April 10th and 11th, 2021, Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, Florida. After a full year with no fans, they were back. Limited capacity, socially distanced, and soaked from rain, but it didn't matter. The energy was electric. This was WWE's first real step back toward normal, and they made it count. WrestleMania 37 opened with a storm delay. The show started late, and WWE had to improvise with unscripted backstage interviews while rain hammered the stadium. It was messy, it was real, and somehow it made the show better. Fans were back, wrestlers were amped, everyone felt like they'd been holding their breath for a year, and now they could breathe again. Let's talk about the main event of Night 1. Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair for the SmackDown Women's Championship. This was the first time two black women main evented WrestleMania, and the emotion was there before the bell even rang. You could see Bianca tearing up, the crowd was on fire, and they delivered a classic. Power, speed, storytelling. Bianca's hair whip sounded like a gunshot. She countered a Banks springboard into a KOD and pinned her clean. Massive pop, one of the most important Mania moments of the decade. Night 2 was all about Roman Reigns. He defended the Universal title against Edge and Daniel Bryan in a triple threat that had everything: nostalgia, technical wrestling, power. Crowd split in all directions. Roman didn't just win, he stacked both guys on top of each other and pinned them at the same time. That image said it all. This was no longer the big dog. This was God Mode Roman. Fully heel, fully in control. Elsewhere on Night 1, Bobby Lashley versus Drew McIntyre opened the weekend for the WWE title. And in a surprise, Lashley retained. Drew went out cold in the Hurt Lock. Great opener, hard-hitting, and the right call. Bobby was peaking, and the crowd loved it. Bad Bunny made his in-ring debut, teaming with Damian Priest against The Miz and John Morrison, and stole the dang show. The guy hit a Canadian destroyer. He took bumps. He nailed his timing. Fans went from skeptical to blown away. One of the best celebrity performances ever in wrestling. Cesaro versus Seth Rollins was a technical gem. Cesaro finally got his first singles match at Mania and made the most of it. Giant swing, UFO, and a clean win over Seth. The internet rejoiced. Night 2 had more ups and downs. Rhea Ripley beat Asuka to win the Raw Women's Championship in a solid, if slightly rushed match that helped reset the division. Kevin Owens versus Sami Zayn, with Logan Paul in the mix, was short but wild. KO stunned Sami, then stunned Logan Paul for the biggest pop of the segment. The Fiend versus Randy Orton. Oof. Looked cool visually. Creepy giant Jack-in-the-Box entrance, but ended with Alexa Bliss bleeding black goo and distracting Bray. Orton hit one RKO and won. The crowd hated it, and WWE dropped the whole thing soon after. WrestleMania 37 was a vibe reset. Fans were back, big moments hit. Bianca, Roman, Lashley all came out stronger than they went in. It wasn't perfect, but it was emotional, loud, and necessary. WrestleMania 38, April 2nd and 3rd, 2022, AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas. This show was fun. That's the best way to put it. 2 nights packed with surprises, nostalgia, chaos, and one very loud, very unexpected, oh my gosh, he's back moment. WrestleMania 38 didn't try to be serious business start to finish. It tried to be entertainment, and it worked. Let's start with Night 1, because that's where the roof came off. Stone Cold Steve Austin made his in-ring return after 19 years. The match wasn't officially advertised, just billed as a KO show segment with Kevin Owens, but once KO challenged him to a no-holds-barred match on the spot, Austin said yes, cracked some beers, and started throwing fists. And the match was actually great. Austin brawled around the arena, took suplexes on the floor, and hit stunners like he'd never left. He beat Owens clean, soaked in the pop, and then stunned him again just because. Nostalgia done right. Also on Night 1, Cody Rhodes returned to WWE. Not as Stardust, not repackaged, but as the American Nightmare, straight out of AEW. He was the mystery opponent for Seth Rollins, and when his music hit, the crowd went nuts. The match was physical, dramatic, and full of storytelling callbacks. Cody hit multiple crossroads, even paid tribute to his dad with a bionic elbow, and got the clean win. It felt like a moment. Bianca Belair versus Becky Lynch might have been the best pure match of the weekend. A year after Becky squashed Bianca in 26 seconds, this was the rematch, and it delivered. High energy, crisp counters, brutal spots. Bianca hit the KOD and won the Raw Women's Championship. Redemption complete. Night 2, chaos in the best way. Pat McAfee wrestled and absolutely crushed it. He beat Austin Theory, looked legit, had the crowd with him, and then he got challenged by Vince McMahon. Yes, the 76-year-old Vince took off his shirt, got in the ring, and beat McAfee with the help from Theory. It was awkward, hilarious, and bizarre, but it didn't end there, because then Stone Cold's music hit again. Austin came back out, stunned Theory, stunned Vince after one of the worst stunner sells ever, which he'd already had one of those in the past that we thought could never be beaten. This beat it. It was bad. And then Austin stunned McAfee, mid-beer chug. It was nonsense, but it was gold. Edge versus AJ Styles was a technical war, methodical, stiff, and clean. Edge won with help from Damian Priest, kicking off the Judgment Day faction. Sami Zayn versus Johnny Knoxville was pure comedy. Interference from Wee Man, mousetraps, giant hands, tasers, full Looney Tunes. Sami bumped like a maniac and made it all work. Knoxville pinned him with a literal giant mousetrap. Stupid. Wonderful. Main event, Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar. Again. This time to unify the WWE and Universal titles. It was short, all finishers, big slams, and Roman won clean after a spear. It was fine. Not legendary, but decisive. The real story, Roman was now the guy. Period. WrestleMania 38 didn't try to be a work rate classic. It gave you surprises, nostalgia, bangers, comedy, and moments people would replay over and over again. And that's what Mania's all about. WrestleMania 39, April 1st and 2nd, 2023, SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles. The tagline, WrestleMania goes Hollywood. Again. And this time, it had the glitz, the drama, and the best long-term storytelling WWE had pulled off in years. This was the peak of the Bloodline saga, and it gave us one of the greatest tag matches of all time. WrestleMania 39 was 2 nights of earned moments, high-stakes drama, and a couple controversial finishes, but it felt big from top to bottom, and it had a clear theme: stories first, spectacle second. Let's start with night 1, because it might have been the best single night of WrestleMania in modern history. Main event, the Usos versus Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens for the undisputed tag team titles. First time a tag match headlined Mania since the 80s, and it deserved it. This was the emotional payoff to a year-long arc. Sami's betrayal of the Bloodline, his reunion with KO, the crowd living and dying with every near fall. And in the end, Sami hit 3 haluva kicks on Jey Uso and got the win. The place exploded, one of the most satisfying Mania finishes ever. Earlier that night, Rhea Ripley versus Charlotte Flair for the SmackDown Women's title was a straight-up war. They beat the heck out of each other. Stiff shots, suplexes, high-impact stuff. Rhea hit a riptide from the top rope and pinned Charlotte clean. Massive win. She'd officially arrived as a top-tier star. Rey Mysterio versus Dominic Mysterio was pure storytelling fun. Dom came out in a prison van. Rey came out with Snoop Dogg. There was family drama, belt whipping, Eddie tributes, and Rey shutting his son up with a 619. The crowd loved it. Also, Seth Rollins versus Logan Paul over-delivered. Logan flew in on a zip line holding a Prime bottle. A Prime bottle mascot was also hanging around the ring with KSI inside it, of course. And the match was crisp and creative. Seth got the win, but the crowd got what they wanted. Night 2, more serious. Higher stakes, more divisive. The main event, Roman Reigns versus Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship. The story was perfect. Cody returned, won the Rumble, chasing the belt his father never won. He had the crowd, the momentum, the fireworks, and for 30 minutes, the match told the story. Near falls, interference, drama, and then Solo Sikoa reappeared. Spike, spear, Roman retained. The crowd was stunned. WWE doubled down on the Bloodline. No feel-good ending yet. Cody's story wasn't finished, and for some fans, that was the wrong call. But it kept the saga going. Elsewhere on Night 2, Gunther versus Sheamus versus Drew McIntyre for the Intercontinental title was pure violence. Stiff shots, hard chops, no wasted motion. Gunther retained in a straight-up war. Arguably the best wrestling match of the weekend. Edge versus Demon Finn Balor in Hell in a Cell was intense, but hurt by a real-life moment. Edge hit Finn with a ladder and cracked his head open badly. They had to pause mid-match for medical attention, which threw off the pacing. Brock Lesnar versus Omos opened Night 2. It was a short, silly spectacle. Brock German suplexed a giant. Fans ate it up for what it was. The Women's Showcase tag match and Liv Raquel winning on Night 2 were filler, but fun. Snoop Dogg filling in for Shane McMahon after Shane blew out his knee during a surprise return. Also an unexpected MVP moment. Snoop hit a people's elbow. No notes. WrestleMania 39 was cinematic, character-driven, and polished. Night 1 was all highs. Night 2 had the bigger stakes and bigger debates, but together, this was Hollywood done right. WrestleMania 40, April 6th and 7th, 2024 at Lincoln Financial Field in Philadelphia. And this one was massive. 2 nights, a sold-out crowd, title changes, career-defining moments, and the end of one of the greatest championship runs of all time. WWE didn't just hype this as a historic WrestleMania, they delivered on it. This was the Bloodline Saga's climax, and it stuck the landing. Let's start with Night 1, because the drama kicked off immediately. The Rock returned to the ring for the first time in over a decade, teaming with Roman Reigns to face Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. The stipulation, if Cody and Seth won, Roman would face Cody the next night under normal rules. But if Rock and Roman won, it would be Bloodline rules. And somewhat predictably, it went the Bloodline's way. The match was wild, cinematic in scale, heavy on the storytelling. Rock was jacked, serious, and working full heel for the first time in years. After a brutal finish, Rock and Roman stood tall, and Cody's uphill battle just got steeper. But the biggest pop of Night 1, Sami Zayn finally dethroned Gunther, ending his 666-day Intercontinental title reign. The match was stiff, emotional, and the crowd was living for every near fall. Sami hit the haluva kick and the building shook. Huge payoff. Rhea Ripley versus Becky Lynch opened the show and set the tone. Rhea was dominant, Becky was scrappy, and the crowd was split. Rhea won clean and cemented herself as the alpha of the division. Jey Uso beat Jimmy Uso in a long brewing brother versus brother match. Not a classic, but satisfying. Jey got his moment, and the crowd was with him the whole way. Then came Night 2, and everything built to the main event. Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. Over a year of build. The rematch from WrestleMania 39. This time, under Bloodline rules. Basically, no rules at all. This match was madness. Solo Sikoa interfered, The Rock returned, John Cena ran down for the save, The Undertaker appeared and took out Rock with a chokeslam. It was total chaos, and it worked. It was booked like a fan fiction event. Philly was losing their minds. In the end, Cody hit Crossroads 3 times. 1, 2, 3, new champion. Roman's 1,316-day reign was over. Confetti. Emotion. Cody had finally finished the story. But that wasn't the only title to change hands. Seth Rollins lost the World Heavyweight Championship to Drew McIntyre, only for Damian Priest to immediately cash in Money in the Bank and beat Drew. 3 title holders in 5 minutes. The crowd didn't stop reacting. Bayley beat Io Sky to win the WWE Women's Championship in a full-circle moment, ending their Damage Control storyline on a high note. And Logan Paul retained his U.S. title in a triple threat against Randy Orton and Kevin Owens, with help from Brass Knucks, of course. Still a heat magnet, still impressing in the ring. Also, LA Knight made his WrestleMania debut and beat AJ Styles, a big moment for a guy who rose fast on fan support. WrestleMania 40 was the end of one era and the launchpad for the next. Cody finally finished the story. Roman's legendary run closed. Rock came back. Cena showed up. Taker gave us one last lights out moment. This was WWE stacking the deck with every tool they had, and it paid off. WrestleMania 40 wasn't just an anniversary, it was a conclusion. The Bloodline saga ended. Cody finished the story, and a new generation stood ready. Legends returned, records fell, and in Philadelphia, the emotion poured out like confetti. It took 4 decades to get here, and now, with the past honored and the future wide open, WrestleMania feels more alive than ever. For 40 years, WrestleMania has been more than just a wrestling show. It's been a mirror, reflecting where the business was, where the world was, and where the fans were willing to go. From sold-out arenas to empty performance centers, from celebrities to underdogs, from Hulk Hogan to Cody Rhodes, every era left its mark. Some stories ended perfectly, others didn't. But every single year, the same question comes back around. What's WrestleMania got for us this time? Because if history tells us anything, it's that when the lights hit, when the music hits, when the world is watching, WrestleMania finds a way to deliver.